Beside me are my top receivers in the 2025 NFL Draft in a pyramid, because people love pyramids. Giza, Doritos, the list goes on and on. In this video, I'm going to break down why I have these guys where I do, and then at the end, we can talk about guys who just missed the cut, who I think have a chance to contribute in the NFL. Now, one thing I'm not going to do is pretend to be an expert, okay? I never played professional football, but I have been doing this for a couple of years, watching the All-22, breaking down the tape, seeing how the guys pan out, listening to people who I trust in the industry. So you can disagree with me. I encourage that. I love to have debates about this stuff. What you can't say is that I didn't watch the film. So with that being said, let's get into it. Break it down to tier 4. First things first, I have Jack Bech from TCU, 6'2", 214 pounds. When I say that, you probably don't think slot receiver, but that's really how I think he projects. I think he could be a really elite power slot player. And at the risk of racially profiling him, he's got some Cooper Kupp in his game. Super physical player, really good run blocker, incredibly sure hands, 1.6% drop rate. That's the lowest in the class. Long arms, able to win with his frame, catches everything in traffic, and honestly separates a little bit better than you might think for someone of his size. You know, if you were to raise questions about his game, it probably is about his speed. I don't think he has that high-end gear. He didn't run the 40 at the combine, but I think he's fast enough, especially in this role where he's settling into zone coverages, making catches, and then making things happen after the catch with physicality. He can get open. He does so with physicality. You know, really strong at the top of his routes. He catches the football and he tries to fight the entire team, which I love. And I'll just say it, he's not going to be able to consistently separate against really sticky NFL man corners, but I don't really think that's what his role is going to be. Put him in condensed splits. Let him get involved in the run game on inserts, right? Cracking defensive ends. He's got the size to do all that, and then working off of that, crossers, winning over the middle, matched up on linebackers, and catching everything. So if you think there's not a role for that guy, you're crazy. And his story as well, like from the outside looking in, what he did at the Senior Bowl, given everything that had happened in his life, I'm not betting against that guy. He has a chance to be a really high end too in the NFL. Next up, Ayomanor from Stanford. So much to like about this guy. Really makes me nervous. Not that he's not going to pan out, but because he is, and I'm going to look like a complete idiot for putting him all the way down in tier 4. He's young, a redshirt sophomore. He was a redshirt freshman when he did what he did against Travis Hunter in Colorado, put up damn near 300 yards on those guys. My concerns about his game are related to his hands, an 8.7% drop rate. And I know drop rate is a hard thing to track, but you see it on tape. Like, there are some concerning drops. And at the college level, and projecting that forward, is that going to go away? Is it going to be easier to track an NFL ball? Is it going to be easier to catch the football when players, better, more athletic players, are draped on top of you? I don't think so, but you never know. Now, there's a lot to like about his game. For one, he is very fluid for his size. I mean, 6'2", 210 pounds, that's a good frame. He can run good routes. The thing is, he's not going to make his money running routes, and so I wish his hands were a little bit surer, because in the NFL, there are going to be DBs that are going to be able to stick with him. And the other thing is that he's not a dominant contested catch player. So you're talking about a guy who's not going to separate at an elite level with a high drop rate and a lower contested catch rate. You know, that's cause for concern. And that's why with him, I see more of a bust factor, than some of the other guys who we're going to talk about. But he is physical, you know, good in the run game, willing blocker. Saw him compete at a super high level against the best DB in college football 2 years ago. So Ayomanor, I think, has higher upside, also a little bit of a lower floor than some of the guys that we're going to talk about. Next up, Noel from Iowa State. I fell in love with this guy watching him on tape. I mean, explosiveness is the name of the game for him, and that's always attractive to me. You know, I like the guys that can go 0 to 60 in a hurry, and that's Noel, right? I mean, he had a really good 10-yard split, top 5 in this year's receiving class, and you see that on the tape as well. Closes space in a hurry, tempos his routes really well, and I liked how Iowa State actually deployed him. You know, a lot of slot fades, a lot of crossers, let him use his speed, but he can also snap down really well, create a lot of separation. He's another guy with a higher drop rate, and that's probably for me why he's not a little bit higher. Talking about the weaknesses of his game and why I don't have him, you know, higher among some of the top flight receivers in this class is just that he's 5'10". Now, he has a good frame, right? He's a stocky 5'10", over 200 pounds. And when you consider how well he moves at that size, that's encouraging. But that's going to put a cap on what he can do, especially because he doesn't have dominant hands. Okay, 7% drop rate, that's up there. right? Now, I'm actually more comfortable with that than, say, Ayomanor's, because unlike Ayomanor, Jalen Noel is going to be able to separate downfield. So I can put up with a drop or two as long as you're creating space with the DB and you're not as hands dependent. I also see a clear role for him and less of a bust factor. I see him as Christian Kirk, and you might say, oh, Christian Kirk. But no, Christian Kirk was a second-round pick. Christian Kirk got a market-setting deal. So he might not be a superstar or even a star, but Christian Kirk is 100% a viable role player. And you can do a lot of the same stuff with Noel in that explosive slot role. I really like this football player, and he's going to make a team better. Moving up to tier 3, we have another Iowa State receiver, Jaden Higgins. This guy is a prototypical X. Okay, 6'4", 216 pounds. But the best part about his game is that he moves like a much smaller player. The way that he's able to get off the line of scrimmage, the way that he's able to get in and out of his breaks and create separation is really impressive. And you hear that a lot, right? You throw it around that a big guy moves like a smaller player. It's actually true in this case. Now, if you're looking for a knock on his game, it's that he's probably not going to be able to do anything at an elite level. He's not going to give you a ton after the catch beyond like spinning out of a catch and picking up some extra yards falling forward. Movement profile very similar to Ayomanor's actually, with a sub 4.5 40, but not the high end speed of someone who's going to be able to make all their money winning deep. You know, he'll be able to stack a DB and wall him off with the frame, but not going to be a pure deep threat. On top of that, he has a contested catch rate of 56%, which is good, but it's not dominant and nowhere near what you need to be like making your money purely on that. But a huge receiver who knows how to run routes and get open and catches the football well, there's always going to be a place in the NFL for someone like that. So for me, he is a round 2 pick at least. Moving on to my only other receiver in tier 3, Tetsuo McMillan. We'll call him Tet, just so I don't butcher his name any more than I have to. This is probably going to piss some people off because Tet McMillan, for a lot of people's money, is wide receiver 1 in this class. Now, don't get me wrong. I totally understand why someone might fall in love with Tet. The frame alone is just super enticing. 6'5", 208 pounds, moves pretty well at that size. I'm going to push back on the people that are like, oh my gosh, look at how he's able to spin out of this stick route. Like, calm down, okay? It's good, it's fine, right? But like, I think he's giving you like Mike Evans after the catch. And I'm not comparing him to Mike Evans because Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. After the catch, I think it's solid. I don't think it's special. Okay, and that's fine because the goal for him is that he's going to be dominant at the catch point. For me, I don't know that I saw that. I saw enough to where I'm confident putting him in tier 3, but I don't see him as this dominant high pointer the way, you know, a Drake London was at USC. I think he goes up and has somewhat of a tendency to play the ball with his body. And most of the time you're going to get away with that at 6'5" just because your chest is all the way up, almost at the height that a DB can elevate to. But against NFL players, you might get into some trouble with that. The other thing playing into this for me individually is that I feel like I have a hard time projecting, you know, pure 50-50 jump ball type guys to the next level. You know, for every Mike Williams and Drake London, there's a N'Keal Harry and a JJ Arcega-Whiteside. And I don't think that's Ted at all, but a 60% contested catch rate, I mean, that's lower than Jack Bech. Granted, you know, a lot of those targets are coming further downfield, but I'm just not sold on him as this elite prospect that some people make him out to be. That said, 100% comfortable with him as a late first-round pick, and I think he will be a good contributor. I just don't think this is like a generational prospect the way some people are kind of forcing him into that mold. Moving into tier 2, we're getting into the territory where if you pick these guys anywhere after like pick 10, I'd be comfortable with that, especially depending on team needs. But we'll go ahead and get it started with Luther Burden. Everyone is overthinking Luther Burden. I don't know any other way to say it. I recognize that there was this drop in production, but it's the same player that you saw put up, 1,200 yards at Missouri last year. They just didn't do as good a job of getting him the football this season. For as much of a down year as it was, I really liked how Missouri utilized him. They moved him all over the field, from out wide into the slot, even in the backfield. I really compare his play style to like nerfed Malik Neighbors, where Malik Neighbors was like a god tier athlete. Luther Burden is not. Now, a 4.41 40 is really good, right? He's an explosive player, but he's not Malik Neighbors, and I'm not going to pretend that he is. That said, super similar frames, around 6 foot, over 200 pounds, and has whole field versatility. He can play that wide back, Deebo Samuel-ish type role while also going out and winning on the perimeter or working out of the slot. Just a super complete player, and just a natural football player. And honestly, in a class of guys, somewhat underwhelming receiving class, like it was refreshing to watch a guy that's like, you know what? He's damn good at football. And that's what I see with Luther Burden. And that's why I'm confident that he's going to pan out in the NFL. I think what he brings to the table can kind of play anywhere as well. Like if you're the Chiefs and you just want a guy to kind of sit in zone coverage, catch the football, and then be dynamic after the catch, he can do that. He can also win on slot fades and back shoulders and be a little bit more dynamic downfield if you want that as well. Not going to be a pure jump ball guy, but he will surprise you. Like he makes some clutch catches and some impressive catches, has really good body control. Luther Burden's going to be good. That's all there is to it. Now, I said Luther Burden was an overthought player. This guy right here is overthought. Emeka Egbuka, okay? The all-time leading receiver in Ohio State history. We're talking about wide receiver U. This guy's number one as far as total yardage. Now, I understand he does not have the raw attributes of some other receivers. He's a fucking pure football player. Okay, the way that he's able to get open, pace his routes, create separation, understand leverage, and then catch the football every single time is going to translate. He's also bigger than you think. He's 6'1", over 200 pounds. Like, this isn't some little slot guy. To me, his game screams featured slot, a la Amon-Ra St. Brown or JSN. The lower body power, the ability to break tackles and fall forward and be shifty. He's got all of it. From everything you hear, he's also like super high character and a great leader and a great interview and just a guy that you want in your locker room. Coming off a national championship, I don't know what's going on. Honestly, the more I talk, I'm thinking maybe I should put him higher, but we're going to talk about number one in a minute. But yeah, Emeka Egbuka, I look at him as really the safest receiver in this class. Which brings me to my number one receiver in this year's class, Texas's Matthew Golden. I see a lot of Garrett Wilson in Golden's name aside from just the physical profile. You have elite stop and start ability and an elite route runner. Far and away my favorite pure route runner in this year's class. If you're talking about just a corner in man coverage, you got to beat him and make him look stupid. That's what Golden does. I mean, a clutch player too. Like you look at what he did on that 4th down play against ASU, a double move, just makes the defender look foolish and sends the game to double overtime. Played in the big spots this year. Not that that super matters for a receiver, but you want to see it. And I just think the combination of production, traits, and polish makes him my favorite receiver in this year's class. I understand he's not the biggest guy in the world, but you can play him all over the field and he will separate all over the field. You know, he ran a 4.2 940. I'm not going to say I totally saw that on film, that kind of speed, but he moves, right? And every route underneath intermediate is easier when the cornerback knows that you can get behind them. And Golden is going to be able to get behind corners in the NFL. I just love the control that he plays with, whether it's in the route, the tempo of his route, understanding leverage and setting up the DB, playing the ball in the air. He has plenty of highlight reel, twisting, contorting catches that make me confident that he can win even when there's a defender on him. And then, of course, after the catch, I mean, it's 1 foot in the ground and he has a chance to go all the way. To me, he has more of a superstar quality and potential about him than anyone else on this pyramid lower than him. I recognize that there are a couple of drops on film. To me, it's not too alarming just based on his play style. A 4.7 drop rate is nothing to be alarmed about. That's pretty much identical to what Malik Neighbors had last year. So Matthew Golden is my wide receiver 1. To me, has the highest upside of anyone, and I could get behind selecting him anywhere around pick 10. As far as guys who were left off this that I think have a chance, I think about Savion Williams, Bech's teammate at TCU, just an athletic specimen, played all over the field at running back and wide receiver, kind of a Cordero Patterson type player is the hope for him. A 10% drop rate it's bad. It's just what it is. But if you're not deploying him as like a perimeter receiver, then maybe you could make that work, especially if he's in this slash role. But he's a total freak and has twitch that you would not believe for a guy of his size. Other players, people get excited about Trey Harris from Ole Miss. I get it, right? He has the size and everything like that. I think he's got a little bit of MVS in his game, but to me, I didn't see the complete receiver that some of these guys are, and just like I have a hard time projecting him to like any specific role. So that's why I don't have him here. Tez Johnson, another guy where the film is good, but I got so burned by Troy Franklin last year, and Tez is like 10 pounds lighter. I don't think he totally separates, and I don't think he's actually as fast out of his breaks as some people might have thought. And so, that 40 you know, in combination with his size is definitely cause for concern. And I wouldn't say that this list is absolutely final. I mean, you know, anything could happen. And I could understand a case for taking Tet over Burden, depending on team needs. And so we'll kind of unpack all that stuff as we get into like mock draft season as we have it. But this is kind of my preliminary thoughts. And I hope you post your thoughts below, because that's what makes the draft fun, is disagreement, but respectful discourse. Remember that. So that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, consider subscribing.